sir, what I understand is that you have studied throughout India since your parents were in defense.
Right.
Now, how did you come to know about Manipal, and how did you decide that you will have to come to Manipal?
It is not clear in my mind how I actually picked Manipal, but I remember very clearly that after my 12th standard, I got admission to a medical college in Uttar Pradesh. And while I was contemplating it, it was clear in my mind, even as a student, that biology wasn't my forte, and therefore medicine clearly wasn't my preferred option. I wasn't passionate about that. At that point, I think an uncle of mine who used to live in Kerala suggested Manipal. And I quite remember that 3-day train journey from Delhi to Manipal to Mangalore. It was a train called the Jayanti Janata Express. Those days, it took a full 3.5 days from Delhi all the way to Mangalore. Doing that train journey and coming to join Manipal in those early days of 1985. So it is a vivid memory in my mind. It was not because I had many options to choose from that I chose Manipal. For some strange reason, my father wanted me to study in South India, and at that point the only college that I had an option to get into for engineering was Manipal. So that's why I got to Manipal.
Once you came to Manipal, were you alone or you came down with your parents?
No, again it's an interesting story, because I remember traveling in that Jayanti Janata Express, and then it stops in a station in Kerala on the way to Mangalore, because that train came down to Kerala and then moved up to Mangalore. My uncle, who was a doctor in Kerala, joined me, and he sort of came with me for the last leg of that journey to handhold me, in a sense, because I was brand new. This was the first time that I was traveling away from my family, and he took me, and I remember we went to from Mangalore, we drove to Manipal and went to Valley View for breakfast, and then went to the Academy of Higher Education office. That used to be a small little office across from the
Tiger Circle.
Yes, very close to Tiger Circle. And went there, and it was still just rainy season. It had just got over, or it was just beginning, so it was all very green and mossy. And I remember going to that small office. The Academy of Higher Education was a really small office, and it struck me that this is a really small place that I've come to, because everything was very small. Tiger Circle, a few shops. It was not very well populated. So it really looked like I had come from Delhi in a train to the most remote part of India, and everything looked very, very small town. The offices, the people were very straight and nice and pleasant. So it was a big departure from the big city of Delhi and all of that, and the cantonment and the Air Force, to this really small town which is very green, very beautiful, and start my sort of the next phase of my life. I didn't know it, but that was a big moment in my life.
Do you remember your first day in Manipal?
Yeah, I still remember it. I remember, for example, I remember getting down in Tiger Circle. We took a bus from Mangalore to Manipal, and we got down in Udupi and took another bus from Udupi, the Udupi bus station, to Manipal. And we got down in Tiger Circle, and I had a bag, and then we picked up the suitcase. And the first walk we had, we took an auto to Valley View, and then came back in that auto to the Academy of Higher Education, Academy office. And I remember from there finishing that and going to one of the restaurants. I don't remember if it was Shantala or the other one down the road, but there was one restaurant just as you come down from the academy, just next to the Tiger Circle. There's a small restaurant. We went and had another coffee there.
Do you remember any of your teachers?
Oh yeah, I remember. I remember my first day in dorms. It was because I came late, I couldn't get the normal rooms I was in the second block, and there was one room on the ground floor which was supposed to be the common room, and there were 4 or 5 last minute students that had come in, And so they converted the common room into what they had never done before, which was a room for 4 students. So they quickly dragged 4 beds and made it a large room. It was a really large room. It was very large compared to all the other 2-seaters and 3-seater rooms. But it was a common room, and so I remember going there. I remember meeting Professor Kamlaksha, who was the warden. He was the first person I met. I vividly remember him. And I remember him, some of the students telling me about the threat of ragging, and all this was very new to me, so I didn't even know it was a big threat when I walked in. And I remember my roommates, one was from UP, one was from, I think, Andhra Pradesh, and there was one that was yet to come. So I remember that first day of the second block, turning right and going to the common.
Once you completed your studies in MIT, you went for higher studies. How did you choose a college? That I see that you went to Illinois.
Yeah. No, I think one thing that Manipal did was, I've written about this and I've said this repeatedly, is that a lot of the students in my batch that came to Manipal didn't come in with academics as a great priority. We hadn't found our calling yet. So people with, let's say, people who could not get into the IITs, people who could not get into regional engineering colleges, a lot of people came with capitation those days. And so it was really not, as we walked in to Manipal, it was more of a group of people who did not have academics as a priority. And I remember thinking that these are all, lots of youngsters from Mumbai and from abroad, from Malaysia and all of that, and having fun, and people had cars and motorcycles. That seemed to be the priority. And I always thought that maybe this is a place that you would not really find anybody who would excel in studies or who would be very ambitious. But very quickly from the second semester onwards, I realized that there was an underlying ambitiousness, underlying theme of wanting to do, which is not necessarily only academic, but it was a very different, very, very rounded off kind of profile of students there that were not the pure academic, intellectual, marks-driven group, but there were a lot more adventure. There was music, there was sport, there was academics, and it was clear that everybody was ambitious and everybody was thinking of life after the BE. And at that time, I also had friends in IIT, and I remember a lot of them would think of B.Tech and then straight to a job. But here there was a lot more of a conversation and a culture about going abroad, studying more, and it became very clear from the second and third year onwards that everybody is going to try and do it. And so automatically that culture of everybody applying, getting forms, was quite prevalent around everybody in my group of my co-students. So we applied, as did everybody else in my batch, to all the universities where students from the previous batch had already gone. So there was that network that was already getting built out because the first 4-year batch had graduated, and a lot of them had already gone to the US and UK. So there was already a network of MITians that was slowly building in the US. So they would send messages and letters and postcards. There was no email still those days. So there was these letters and postcards that would come and say, this college is good, there are scholarships available here, research assistantships available here. So that kind of a environment of knowledge and aspiration was getting built up from very early on in the third year, moving to the fourth year. So it was not surprising that almost everybody in my batch applied to go abroad, and most of them did go abroad.
Now, as a student in MIT, were you naughty or were you a sober student?
No, I think I was. I came in like a typical defense officer's son, very disciplined and not very exposed to life in the real world. So a slightly protected life, and then straight away from the first semester, when you have to deal with ragging and all of that, you are quickly put in, like I said, you become a man very quickly. You go from being a young boy, sort of protected by his parents and groomed by the environment, to a kid who learns how to fend for himself very quickly. It was not unusual, for example, for us to go in an unreserved seat repeatedly from Bangalore to Delhi, which is not, for today's kids, imagine 3.5 days in a train that had just planks, and 3 tire berths. So you had one compartment of 300, 400 people, all stuffed in a thing, and you did 3.5 days of that, and we did it repeatedly, and I don't think anybody complained about it. It was something that we so it toughened us, it made men out of boys. I always said that Manipal made a man out of me very, very quickly. It taught me, not just vegetarian mess and non-vegetarian mess and how to live off 350 rupees that your parents sent you, but also how to go from Manipal to Bangalore or Manipal to Goa with 50 rupees in your pocket. So we learned a lot of things there that are not really necessarily in any textbook. It built character of a certain type. It built tenacity. It built the ability to survive, which I think I would have never got if it was some other kind of an institution. Being distant from home and being, as it is a remote town, and being in this atmosphere, it clearly transformed me very quickly. And so, no, I don't think I was not a studious student when I joined. I had my fair share of problems with everybody, including, we had a principal those days called K.V. Kamath, and he and me had a lot of run-ins. I was in the students' union, and we did our fair share of driving to Red Sun and all those places that are not necessarily academic destinations. But the key was that at the end of the day, what I had set out to do, I achieved. Because everybody, when I joined, had thought that I was an average student. And then when I graduated, I came second in the Bangalore University. And the irony was this group that we had we were in D19, this group of students who lived in D19 in the last year, were all very party, animalish group. We had a lot of fun. We used to take our motorcycles on a Friday and then come all the way to Bangalore on one tank of gas and and with 50 rupees. I remember coming with 50 rupees, 3 of us, and then going to the MG Road parade ground, not knowing what to do, and then we bought one bottle of beer and 3 of us shared it. And it is ironical that after that we pushed the bike and went to a hotel called Hotel Barton that used to be on MG Road. And it used to be owned by a Gujarati gentleman who took one look at us and said, "No admission for you, no rooms for you." And it is ironical because many years later when I got married to my wife, the same gentleman, happened to be a very close friend of my wife's family. So when I met him, I said, "I don't know if you remember, but you actually turned me away from your hotel." So those are the life experiences that you got when you were in Manipal. But I, at the end of the day, ended up graduating second in Bangalore University in electrical.
So even the Regional Engineering College was part of Bangalore University.
Yes,
then.
and I was second.
Yeah, second.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, it surprised everybody. Most of all me. It surprised me, and again, life comes full circle because the gentleman who gave me my degree was Professor Srinivasan, who used to be the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission in those days. And many years later, when I got my honorary doctorate from VTU, I didn't know this, but I landed up there for my honorary doctorate, and the same Professor Srinivasan gave it to me.
Wow.
And I told him, "I hope you remember this." And he said, "Yes, I remember." And in his speech, he said, "I have the honor and the privilege of having given him both his undergraduate degree and his Doctor of Science." So yeah, so those are all experiences that I got thanks to Manipal.
So you joined Intel after your post-graduation,
Yeah.
and you are a part of the 486 32-bit processor project. So how was your life there?
No, look, one thing that Manipal, clearly MIT, my last year and a half in MIT did was to convert me and put me clearly, I had found my calling, and my calling was programming. Manipal, MIT had just introduced what is by today's definitions a nothing computer, but those days it was called a mini computer, which is a DCM Spectrum 7. It was in a nice big air conditioned room, and there was a queue of people. You had to take slots to program on it. And I spent the whole of the last 1 year in MIT only working there, and only working on that. And so I knew when I graduated from MIT that computers and me were my future. I mean, computers were my future. So my first 1 or 2 jobs in India were not jobs that I enjoyed. Then my third job, like another 1 month, were training jobs. I joined a computer company in Delhi called Softtech. It is one of the first IT companies in India called Softtech, and I was programming the screen manager for Pascal compiler. I worked there for about 6 months, and then I went off to IIT. In Illinois, I was a prolific programmer. I used to program. I didn't get scholarship initially, so I used to program and do coding for all kinds of companies in Chicago. I used to do programming for AT&T. I used to do programming for small companies. I used to do programming for graduate students who wanted programs done for their projects, and I made a lot of money like that. So as I was doing that, again, fate. As a young boy in the Air Force, my doctor used to be an Air Force officer called Wing Commander Dham. His brother used to be the most senior Indian in Intel, called Vinod Dham. And my first job that I got was from Microsoft. And just since I was software, I never thought of Intel at all, because it was a hardware company, and I always thought of it like those days people thought of it like. I happened to just send off my resume to Vin. And Vinod Dham, after I got the Microsoft job, I said, no, I don't need it, I'm going to Seattle. Vinod Dham then made it a point to convince me to fly all the way from Chicago to the West Coast, meet the Intel chief architect called John Crawford, and sold me on joining Intel. So I left what I thought was my dream job of joining Microsoft, tail end of the 486 project as an architecture verification engineer, and then quickly moved to the Pentium. And those are the 2 chips on the wall. Yeah.
Now, when did this entrepreneurship started calling you?
No, I was never. If you had asked me in any time in my life, would you ever have thought of starting a business or be in business, I would have said no. I never thought I had business in my blood. As a matter of fact, when I first met my wife, she was doing an MBA. I didn't even know what a balance sheet was, and I kept asking her, why should a balance sheet balance? Why should the assets and liabilities balance? Don't you think logically you should have more assets than liabilities? So, I was that naive about it. I was a pure techie. I loved my computers, I loved coding, and it was just ironic that after I got married, I happened to meet Rajesh Pilot, who was then the minister here, and he happened to be the student of my father's in the Air Force. And he told me, like this, we were having a chat, and he said, "Arey, forget US for some time. This is a new India. By the way, this is 1990. This is a new India. You should forget about the US, come here." And I had already made $1 million in Intel. With my stock options, I was doing very well there, and I was in the Pentium team. And I said, okay, why not take 1 year off and try it? And in that 1 year, I sat and did the paperwork for applying for a cellular license, and I got the license. And so then, and I didn't know anything about cellular, excepting that during our wedding, when I had gone to Guruvayur temple in Kerala, it was monsoon, And I remember vividly that because of the monsoon, I could not make a phone call from Delhi to from Guruvayur to Delhi. And I would sit at the reception of the hotel and say lightning call 18 times the price or some ridiculous amount, and they would dial and they would connect me, and I had to shout. It was clear to me that telecom, there was a problem in India. And so when I heard about cellular and Rajesh Pilot told me about this, I said, let's try. And that's the rest is history, as you said.
So you started the BPL
Mobile.
So once you started BPL Mobile, and it was fairly doing well, why did you actually sell your stake to SR Group?
So this is how I did it. I was in telecom for 10 years, about more than 10 years, about 12 years, but 10 active years. And in those 10 years, I went from being absolute non-entrepreneur, knowing nothing about business, to building a billion-dollar business, then seeing the politics of this country destroy it and make it to zero, and then rebuild it again. So in 10 years, and there is an article written about it, that I lived in those 10 years what people do in 3 lifetimes. I went from being a techie to an entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur. I built a billion-dollar company, and then I saw, because big companies in India wanted to muscle into that business, my business getting almost destroyed and starved because of policies, then rebuilding it, fighting the political system and rebuilding it. So I saw all that. And I also realized that in India, while if you're a pure techie, entrepreneurship is easier. But the moment you get into businesses that are government linked, that are government policy driven, the politics of this country plays a big part in whether you're successful or failure. So I had done this. In 2004, the government had changed. I had realized, I had seen the writing on the wall when I saw the Rajas of the world becoming minister. And I realized that the dynamics of this business is going to be very, very political. And I had built a billion-dollar business. I had an offer from four different players. And I was not seeing myself as a runner of companies. I saw myself as a builder of companies, builder of brands. And I said, I don't see any more challenges except, and I said this in an interview on the day when I sold, that the only challenge left in telecom is lobbying for free spectrum in Delhi. And neither am I good at it, nor do I want to be good at it. And I will leave it to other people who are good at it to do it. I'm happy to take $1 billion check and move on to do other things. And that's what I did.
Today you have investments in various sectors, and one of your core areas has been media. So what interested you actually? How did you get into the idea of entering the media sector?
So again, like I said, throughout my life, I mean, while entrepreneurs tend to say everything is a very part of a very calculated strategy, everything that has come to me has been through fate. And I mean, the opportunity has come to me by a sleight of hand, and I have, of course, followed through with a lot of effort. So after I sold my telecom company, and I was doing 1 year of doing nothing, just getting fit and spending some time with the family, I used to on all Sunday afternoons watch a Malayalam channel called Asianet. It used to play these good movies of Mohanlal and Mammootty, and I used to enjoy that, have biryani or something and watch that in the afternoon. And I used to be a big fan of the channel. And suddenly, an opportunity presented itself that the owner of Asianet wanted to sell it. And I said, okay, let me buy it, because it's a channel I enjoy. And let's see what it will do. And I didn't pay very much for it. It was a one market channel, one channel, Asianet. But in 3 years, I built that into a multi-language network of entertainment channel, assembled almost 3,000, a library of about 3,000 movies, rights to 3,000 movies, and I sold it to Star. And I said at the time that I sold it to Star. In those 3 years, I made more money than I made in the 11 years of telecom.
Okay.
So it struck me very clearly that media and entertainment is a great opportunity, especially in South India, because everybody in India tended to focus on Hindi and English and the North. And as part of the sale to Murdoch, because if they were a foreign company, Star, the news part, which foreign companies cannot own, I had to keep. So suddenly I became the owner of a news channel or two news channels. I built that out into what is now a very successful company which has multiple news brands. That is part economic. There is a financial interest, of course, in that, and I think we are quite successful in terms of the investment. But it is also partly because I believe that media has a role to play in democracy, and that really in India there aren't any good, solid, credible brands. And so I have attempted to, in this company, build brands that span not just one market, but that same language in other markets as well. So, for example, the Malayalam channel is clearly the most watched channel in the world in terms of Malayalis. Suvarna News again has a good footprint in Karnataka for Kannadigas, but also has a significant footprint outside for expat Kannadigas. We have now invested in English channel Republic, and we have a very high growth digital platform called asianetnews.com. So, and we are now making other investments as well. So I think I see my current media portfolio as part, like any other investor, to make money, but also part to discharge a certain duty to the society and community that those channels serve. So I'm hoping that I'm going to be successful in both, and that's
in one of your interviews I read Rajeev is leftist in Kerala and rightist in Mumbai, and he says
no, what you didn't say about Rajeev was rightist in Kerala. It said the channels are.
Yeah.
So the editor is a leftist editor in Asianet News in Kerala, and it may be a rightist in Karnataka. The English may be even extreme right. My philosophy on that is I don't determine that. My philosophy is that I look for good, credible people, leaders, who will then run a product. I don't determine whether the media product is left of center or right of center or center. But I do insist on two things. That the interests of the community or the state it serves and the interests of the country will never be compromised. So no platform of mine will ever allow anything that is what in my mind bad for our nation, bad for our interests. Second is, I never allow, this is the only place I interfere, that I will never allow integrity and truth to be compromised. So there is no question of whether it's Asianet News or Republic or Suvarna News or Kannada pushing an agenda that is based on fiction and lies. So integrity and in a sense a commitment to the larger interests of the community in the country. These are the two things I safeguard. Now whether the editor likes Marxism more than the BJP or the Congress more than I don't intervene. That is him, and he has to defend himself or she has to defend herself to the audience. I don't come as a shield for the editor between him or her and the audience. It is for him or her to defend. So I get a lot of, for example, sometimes flack when Arnab Goswami of Republic takes a particular position, or my editor in Kerala takes a particular position. But I say, very simple, it is for the editor to respond to his audience or her audience. It is not for the investor or the owner to start rationalizing why he did what he did or why he said what he did. And the moment that relationship between the audience and the editor starts unraveling and unwinding, please understand the reality and the dynamics of media. That if you lose your audience, you lose everything. So for a third party to sit in judgment of the relationship between an editor and an audience is a bit is a nonsensical proposition. Because if he values his own longevity and his own sustainability and his own credibility, he will make sure that his audience believes in him.
How easy was it, or how difficult was it to invest in Mr. Arnab's channel?
No, it is not. I always believe it's never difficult to invest in anybody, any superstar, provided your objectives are clear, honest, and transparent. A lot of people make the mistake of investing in media for extraneous reasons. Politicians will invest in media to further their political ideology. Businessmen sometimes invest in media to extend their clout in business. If you do those things, you are bound to fail. The only way a media investment will work and the relationship between an investor and an editor will work is if there are clear matching of expectations. And in this case, whether it's me and Arnab, or me and MG Radhakrishnan in Kerala, or me or Ravi Hegde in Bangalore, the expectations are very simple. Integrity, honesty, and essentially serving the community and the country well. That's it. There's nothing else that I ask for from them, and there's nothing that they have to give.
Now, how did your political journey start?
So, again, like I said, everything about my life and my life journey is fate. I got into telecom by fate, I got into Intel by fate, I went to the US by fate, I got into Manipal by fate. Similarly like this, I was in 2006, I had just finished 2005, I had just sold my company. And one Sunday evening a friend of mine came home. I was not expecting him to come. He said, he had a cup of coffee and he said, I am headed to meet Mr. Devegowda. Why don't you come? So I said, I don't know Mr. Devegowda and why should I come? He said, no, come. You know, he was not well. He's a senior leader. I said, yeah, I know who he is. And since when he said he's in the hospital and he's not well, I said, okay, let me come. And I won't again forget, it was an evening and it was a hospital quite outside of Bangalore towards Yashwantpur. And Devegowdaji looked at me in the first 5 minutes, we were meeting for the first time. And he said to me, what are you doing? So I said, I just sold my telecom company and I'm doing nothing. He said, have you thought of joining politics? This was exactly the question he asked me. So I said, not really, but I have some experience of politics in the sense that I've had a big battle some years ago. And I'm interested in politics. And just like that, he said, I want you to be Rajya Sabha.
Oh, yeah.
It took exactly 24 hours for me to go from an unemployed ex-entrepreneur to a prospective political candidate. And he did not have all the votes required. He needed the BJP support. And so I got on an aeroplane and went to Delhi. And I met Advaniji, I met Arun Jaitley, and they said, fine. And we'll support, because that was a seat that they could not win on their own. They could only win with the JDS in alliance, so they were already in alliance with JDS in the government. And it just happened like that. It just happened, and I remember thinking that this is I went through that whole process like I was in a daze, because I did not know. I was entering the Vidhan Sabha for the first time. I was meeting MLAs for the first time, and there were a lot of people who were not very happy with it, saying who's this big money bags who's coming into politics and all of that. But I went through it and I got the record number of votes, and I remember again very vividly my first day in Rajya Sabha being sworn in. It was like being in Manipal on the first day. I was sweating, and my shirts were all stained with my sweat. And then Bhairav Singh Shekhawat, who was the Vice President of India, he noticed that I was nervous and he said, he took me and he said, don't worry, I've heard of you and you'll do well. And that is how it started.
How did your family take it? Like one fine evening you say that I'm planning to do an MP.
The years leading up to that, I was already seen by many as I had already created credentials of being a fighter. I was in telecom. You must understand the entire 10-year journey of telecom was marked by repeated fights and challenges by vested interests, other businessmen trying to push you out, politicians trying to bribe you, block you. I had to deal with people like Sukram, who refused to allow me to start my network, despite the fact that I was the first one in the country to be ready, because he wanted the competitor to catch up. So I had already made a reputation of being a maverick fighter already. So my family was quite.
So you had already.
I think my family was more worried about the parliament rather than worried about me, that I would go do something there or say something there. But I was already. I mean, Arun Jaitley, for example, famously called me in 2004 that you are a jihadi. That, I was like that. And I went into telecom not because it was a cushy job. I went in. By the time I got there, I knew that I was going to do something, meaningful, and I was not going to waste even 1 minute of the time that I had. So it took a little bit of time to adjust, because like everybody, I also thought that politics is full of crooks and corrupt people and all that. But I realized that very quickly. I realized that while there were some bad people, a large part of the people had very significant, deep knowledge about this country. Things that I didn't know even 1% of. I knew telecom, I knew technology, I knew programming, I knew computers, but I didn't know the whole dynamics that runs a billion people and the democracy that runs it. So the first 1 year was just learning, getting to understand what being a parliamentarian was. But very quickly in 2007, I latched on to the 2G scam, and that became my first real parliamentary effort. And that I was the first MP to latch on to that issue, and that became the famous 2G scam, or the infamous 2G scam, as you know. And so then I found my calling, and while I was in the opposition throughout, I was never in the treasury with the Congress. I continued to fight them on whether it's 2G, Colgate, and I brought what I think is a different perspective to Parliament. I spoke from a perspective of, for example, the economy. I have spoken in the last 12 years on every budget, and I would talk about governance reforms. I would talk about regulatory institutions, things that Parliament had not really heard so far. So people would dismiss me, saying that yes, sir, high-tech issues here and all that. But I stuck to the course, and I'm quite happy with the way I've dealt with my political career.
You spoke of net neutrality much before the Facebook idea came up.
Yeah.
So what prompted you to take it up there?
If you see, these are all interconnected. Even the 2G or network policies and telecom policies and technology policies, and we talk about investments and companies coming in. There has not been enough of a discussion on the rights of the consumers. Whether you are a house owner, whether you are a telecom owner, whether you are a motorcycle owner, in India there is an imbalance and asymmetry between the rights of a consumer and the powers of a corporate. And it is in that context that I started a narrative of consumer rights. It is good to be digital India. It is good to be technologically enabled India, but it is also important to make sure those technology enabled consumers have the rights when their rights are trampled. So that is where we talked about, for example, call drops. It is important that if you are a subscriber of a telecom company and he underinvests and your call qualities are bad, he doesn't charge you and he is at least held accountable. So that narrative I started. In that context, when there was a move to now start saying that we will start creating islands within the internet, an island controlled by Airtel, an island controlled by Vodafone, an island controlled by Facebook, I stepped up and said no, the internet, and I have reason to say that because in the early days of the internet, I worked on the internet in the US. And the internet didn't come up because some billionaire owned it. The internet came up because hundreds and thousands of people all around the world collaborated and created a ownerless network. And to keep it ownerless, to keep it a network that really was about consumers, regardless of whether you're rich or poor, is the entire character of the internet. And so that is why I push back strongly when the TRAI, the regulator, tried to push through a consultation paper that was at the behest of the 4 telecom companies. And we had, as you know, 5 lakh people come out and there was a big fight. And those are things that I revel at, because those are my natural DNA is about being anti-establishment. So I did that, and as is the case, when people stand up and speak, the establishment steps back, and they step back. And now we have today, 3 years on, a net neutrality regime that is emerging in India that is even superior to the US, which is actually going the reverse. So I think that's proof that I think this kind of political activism and working with enlightened citizens does make a difference.
You have been a part of NDA, but many a times you have taken an independent stand. So how do the people from your party treat you?
No. So first of all, I am not in any party. So the whole idea is that I am independent. I have always been independent, and it is not that I chose to be independent. That is how I elected myself. And being independent means that I have the ability and right and the flexibility of maintaining my independence from even when it differs with, let's say, the BJP, which is a senior partner of the NDA. I differed with them on FDI and retail during the UPA government. I have differed with them on Aadhaar. They have also disagreed with Aadhaar, but
in the initial stages.
And but I continue to be a petitioner on the Supreme Court against Aadhaar, and I'm quite clear that we will prevail. I was contrary to the government on privacy in the PIL in the Supreme Court on whether privacy should be a fundamental right. The government took a position, the Attorney General took a position that privacy should not be a fundamental right. I was one of the petitioners who argued that privacy should be a fundamental right. So when things are clearly etched in my mind and I believe in them, no politics will make me compromise that. I know what is right and wrong. I am happy to debate what is right and wrong, but after the debate, if we conclude that this is right, the politics of the day will not make me change that. That comes from being a son of an Air Force officer. I mean, all I know in my growing up days is that whether we lived in a small hut in the northeast or in a asbestos house in Yelahanka and walked from Nepal to Yelahanka, one thing that was ingrained to me is that on the issue of right and wrong, there is no grey area, and that is how I lived my life, whether it's in politics. That is why I am not a very popular politician in many people. And so, amongst politicians, I am not very popular.
Yeah, that's right.
But amongst people, I am popular, and for me, that is what public service is about. It is I am serving the public. As long as my positions of right and wrong are appreciated with a larger audience, even if a few politicians don't like it, I'm okay with that. And but the good news is, in the last 3 or 4 years, the political leadership that India has thrown up are people who appreciate that kind of a position of sticking to what is right, regardless of what the consequences are. That every move and every decision you take is not calculated based on what the rewards of that move will be. So I have reasonably, in the last 12 years, managed to manage a political line of what I believe is right, and when it is wrong, I say it's wrong.
When you brought out the private bill on declaring Pakistan as a terrorist state, and bringing that itself was a big thing, and drafting it and bringing it, how was the reaction across the political class?
It started because on the Uri, when there was an attack in Uri attacks, I was angry, and as usual in Delhi, there will be TV channels that will put mics in front of you, and somebody put a mic in front of me, and I had just come out of a briefing on Uri, and I said, this is enough, and I take an oath today that we will ensure Pakistan is held accountable, and I will bring a bill to Parliament. If Parliament, and it had been told to me only that day, it had been reminded to me that Parliament of India had not spoken a word about Pakistan since 1994. Despite Mumbai 26/11, despite all those terror attacks in India, the Parliament of India had remained silent about Pakistan all those years. So it seemed to me that 23 years was a long time for the Parliament, which is the representative institution of the people of India to be silent about Pakistan. Number one. The moment I submitted the bill and I tweeted about it and released it to the media, I was flooded with responses. I mean, all my years in politics, I've got a number of responses for a number of things I've done, including net neutrality. But this one just overwhelmed me. I would go to the airport and people would come and say, in Delhi, Karna hai, you must do it. Don't back down, don't back off. So I said, that charges you up even more. And it became clear to me that every man, woman and child in this country had the same one thought about Pakistan. There was nobody else excepting a few intellectual elite in Delhi who kept saying peace and lighting candles and all that. That most people did not want war with Pakistan, but they clearly wanted Pakistan to be held accountable and a spotlight put on Pakistan's track record of fostering terrorism. And so I did that. And of course, what happened after that I am not very satisfied with, because I withdrew the bill on the assurance of the government that they did not require legislative backing for doing this and that they would use the executive powers of government to do what I am suggesting. Now, it has been a year and some months and not very much has been done about it. But every time there is a discussion of that with people in the government and those whom I know, they say, look, we are going to look at the right timing to do this. The basic principle and the basic concept has been agreed to not just by India, it's been agreed to by the US, UK and almost every Western democracy. So as long as now we create a consensus that Pakistan's behavior has to be changed, we don't want to finish off Pakistan, we don't want to destroy Pakistan, we don't have any enmity towards the Pakistani people, but we have to make the Pakistani state transform itself into a civilized nation so that it can be a neighbor worth having. It's like you and me having a criminal in our background as a neighbor. You will not enjoy it, I will not enjoy it, our families will always be upset. So I think that process has started with President Trump's statement recently, etc. etc.
So the new initiatives by the government, there are multiple initiatives. One of the main core initiatives has been Make in India, and many of the defense projects are taken up in India. So you as an entrepreneur, have you thought of investing in this area?
No, look, what I do today is I don't run companies, I invest. So I look for good entrepreneurs, good idea, and I am willing to support it. For me, everything has to be, at the end of the day, the core theme has to be innovation, creativity, doing something that hasn't been done before, etc. So I have invested in a number of people and a number of companies today that are essentially playing to high tech, high-end technology that could lend itself in not just military but also in homeland security. It could lend themselves in urban governance. So I like that area. I think I'm very supportive of the government's strategy to say that as one of the biggest consumers of these strategic technologies, we should have in-house, in-country capability. If that capability has to be brought by foreign companies, it has to be developed by Indian companies or developed by PSUs or as a combination of all three. It's good. But one mistake the government has made, and I have repeatedly raised this, is they're leaving the PSUs out of Make in India. The public sector units like HAL, BEML, BEL, the shipyards, they have over the last 50 years created great expertise and capability. We must transform them into nimble competitive companies rather than saying, leave it, don't give it to them. So that I think now they're beginning to change and giving it also to the PSUs.
What's your take on the research that is going on in the Indian universities?
No, this I have talked about it again, and this is one of the areas that I believe we are losing out. I am on the board of Indian Institute of Science, and I think science and pure science, and then there is applied science. We are not investing enough, and I don't mean by money. I don't mean money investment as much as motivation. there aren't enough institutions and there is not enough competition amongst institutions to create scientists or science. So the science temperament in India, in my opinion, if somebody puts a graph to it, over the last 2 decades has actually come down. So the best measure is today, if you step back and say, when will India next have a Nobel Prize or be in the contention for a Nobel Prize in one of the sciences or the math? Today you can't even say it's 20 years from now. I can say today, for example, in athletics, that we may get a gold medal in so-and-so sport in 12 years or 15 years. I can project. Because there is a talent pool. And there are institutions that are grooming the talent pool. In science, unfortunately, the information technology space, science space, there has become a blurring. And instead of more technology going towards science, we are essentially bringing pure science research down to applied science and IT, which is not the same as saying physics or math or chemistry or biology. So I think there India is missing, is not missing an opportunity as much as India still does not have a cohesive strategy, leadership that is driving that. Even in Indian Institute of Science, which is India's premier science, I find that the work that they are doing is, while it is much better than the work in many institutions, but a large part of the work is also application driven. So it finds immediate application in, let's say, a military project or some project. But that's not what science is supposed to be. Science is also supposed to be, a lot of it is blue sky stuff, looking at, real pure science. And that, I think, there is not enough of a focus given. Maybe there aren't enough people who understand the value of it in political leadership. Whatever it is, that is an area that we must address because, in a sense, otherwise, pure science is now getting concentrated in 2-3 capitals of the world. It is the US, some parts of Western Europe, and in Japan. There is not much of it happening anywhere else in the emerging world, and we've got to step up because we were always good in science. We have to step back up to the plate and become leaders in science again.
You having immense knowledge in technology, what would be the next disruptive technology according to you?
No, I think the mistake is to try and pinpoint one technology that is going to be disruptive. I think it is safe to assume that we are only at the early stage of what is going to be a very, very disruptive phase. We are at early stages of that. The full power of the internet, the full power of artificial intelligence, the full power of Internet of Things, when all these things start merging together, we are going to find the jobs as we see it become irrelevant. We are going to find a completely new model and paradigm in terms of both the economy and the individual's life emerging. I've never been a person who looks at the crystal ball and says, I'm betting on that technology, betting on that technology. I think if you are a business, or if you are an entrepreneur, you are an investor, or even if you are an individual, you have to brace yourself for what is going to be the deepest, most disruptive set of changes that are just going to come. And that may be at your workplace, at your home, at your community, neighborhood, whatever. But we are only beginning to see the early signs of it. When it fully plays itself out, what we had and where we'll be totally unrecognizable.
Recently, one of the big investment disruptors, I call, rather than technology disruptor, it has been by Reliance, investing huge sums of money in the telecom space. You being from the telecom area, how do you see it?
No, I see. I'm neither impressed by it nor am I unimpressed by it. I mean, it is very easy to disrupt a set chessboard. If you have what was the telecom sector before Reliance came onto the scene? It is the most predictable duopoly, duopoly, 3 companies carving up the market, almost like a cartel, with very little innovation, with very high degrees of customer dissatisfaction. To disrupt that doesn't take very much. For me, disruption is not Reliance coming and spending $15 billion and waking up Airtel, Vodafone and BSNL. I mean, that is just a power of the balance sheet. There is no innovation there. It's just you bring in a lot of money and you disrupt things. I don't call that disruption. I call disruption somebody who will turn the head and make Facebook relevant. I call the disruption somebody who takes a conventional Google search model and his ad revenue and make that relevant. I call disruption when the entire interface today to our devices and entire interface to the ecosystem of the internet is turned on its head with Amazon's Alexa or those kind of things. Those are disruptive technology. That's why I said we are only beginning to see early signs of it.
Yeah, so
Alexa is nothing. We are talking about deep neural networks mining data and information and habits that are only at the early stages. So imagine I saw something on WhatsApp some months ago comparing the computing power of your iPhone or your Samsung phone to the computing power just a decade ago, comparable computing power and the footprint that occupied. So imagine if at that same Moore's law rate, innovation, forget Moore's law was about transistors. Imagine if we talk about innovation per square micron or per micron. And if you have Alexa today sitting there like this, or you have Siri like that. Imagine if that starts getting embedded into and becoming a much more powerful way of driving, how we interact with our environment. So I call those things disruption. Now,
that's why we call it investment disruption.
Yeah, I don't even think that word is disruption. I think that is normal. In any business cycle, when some existing incumbent becomes lazy and comfortable, there is always somebody who will come and say, I'm going to come and eat your lunch. That is normal. It happens in airlines, it happens in automotive, it happens in telecom, it happens in computers. You don't hear about Wang, you don't even hear nowadays about Dell, for example, which is so powerful. Is now going through a reinvention. So that, in my opinion, is different because it is the same category, same product, and you're fighting for the same customers. For me, disruption is when you take an ecosystem of consumers and give them an experience that they have never experienced, and in the process take the lunch, breakfast and dinner from other people who are dealing with those consumers.
Coming up with the cryptocurrency now. As of now, it's not a legal tender in India.
Yeah.
So how do you see it?
No, I think, I asked a question in Parliament. I stood up and asked the Finance Minister recently in the last session of Parliament. It is not backed by any guarantee. But is it illegal? Can you and I still exchange Bitcoin as long as it is our agreement? So he did not answer that question because it seemed to me that if it is illegal, then a blanket prohibition on any transaction with cryptocurrencies is easy for the government to enact. But the government has not done that, but has only said it's not legal tender. So the Finance Minister told me, Mr. Jaitley told me that he has formed a committee. And the committee will give a report in 3 months, and then that committee will decide or make the recommendations to the government on what the government's regulatory views, policy views to cryptocurrency should be. After demonetization, I think 3 days after demonetization, November 11th, 2016, I wrote a letter to the RBI and to the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister saying that while we are cleaning up black money, don't forget that the black money can go digital. While we are cleaning up the black economy, don't forget that you can create a digital black economy with the dark net and all of that. You can easily create. I have been told by at least 2 instances where police or the income tax has raided bureaucrats in a government, state government, and found notings that they were taking bribes in Bitcoin. So the Bitcoin in India, of course, the moment you have a corrupt government officials start dealing in Bitcoin, then you know that there is a digital black economy under construction. So there are legitimate dangers of allowing the cryptocurrency ecosystem to develop and be unregulated. And surveillance of that for a conventional government organization it is not that easy. I mean, government in India can barely, or any country, can barely handle the normal black economy. Without raids and all that intrusive stuff. So imagine now you take the same black economy and then layer it with all kinds of technological sophistication buried in the darknet. So the same group of bureaucrats, you tell them, we're doing this to manage that. So it requires capability enhancement in the government, it requires some policy rework, it requires surveillance and regulatory capacity to be built up both in the RBI and in the government. But fortunately, both the conversations I've had with both RBI governor and with the finance minister, they are aware of this problem and they will do something.
During this conversation, you said you wrote a letter. So just reminded me that all your transactions or communications with the government is posted on the net.
Yeah.
So what made you to do that?
I think I realized early on that as an individual MP, if I write to the government, the typical tendency of a government is to dismiss it. So who is he independent? How many people does he have behind him? Nobody. Ignored. And that happened, for example, in 2007 on the 2G scam. I used to get letters from Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was a good friend of mine and is still a good friend of mine, saying, I have received your letter about the 2G scam, with regards. And I would get these acknowledgement letters. Then I realized one good way is to get the people behind my communication. So I would put every correspondence of mine, every issue that I raise, whether it's a parliamentary question or a letter or a petition, I would put it up on the net. What I did was, it brought more and more people to focus on that and they could read it. So then some sort of a quasi-public opinion would then form. It does not work for everything, but it's something that has. For example, one rank, one pension. I did the petition, put it on my website, started a petition online. A lot of people responded to it. Same child sexual abuse, I did the same thing, started a petition. 5 lakh people responded, net neutrality. So having that is one, makes it transparent on what I'm dealing with the government on. Second is it allows people to get behind that cause.
Now coming to the last phase, how has been your family supporting you? Do they give you suggestions regarding business, or is it just...
No, business, I have made it very clear. I mean, from day one, when I set out to start and create my own thing, I said it will never be a family thing, because there are too many instances in this country and the world of family-run businesses that then finally go in a different direction. Second is, everything I do, whether it's my politics, whether it's my political team or it's my my business team, I expect high degree of professionalism. I am a very hardworking person. I demand a lot from myself, and so I demand a lot from people who work with me. That is not possible when you start surrounding yourself with friends and family. You can't have, if you suddenly hired your son or you hired your wife or hired your sister, it's very difficult to be setting exacting standards. So that is one of the reasons why I don't allow that to happen. So it is, what I do is, at the end of the day, run a very professional, transparent operation, whether it's my public life or whether it's my business. I make it clear upfront what it is that I want to achieve. I put my 90% effort into it, and then I expect the other people to put 10, 15, 20, as the case may be. And that is the relationship that I have with everybody.
What would be a personal free time of yours? How would you spend it? Because I see in your cabin set of guitars.
No. So here's the thing. I don't see my work as anything apart from passion. For everything I do in my life, I enjoy. If I don't enjoy it, I stop doing it. So my politics, if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it. 1 minute, I wouldn't do it. If investing, I did not enjoy it. If I didn't come to work every day at 8 o'clock in the morning, I come not because of anything else, because I just something that I feel very passionate about and enjoy. So I don't think of as free time or this. For me, all of this is the same. I fly. I like flying. I like reading. I like music. I like investing. I like politics. So they are all for me as equally happy. They all make me happy. They all put a smile on my face.
This book, what we are planning to come out, is on entrepreneurs. So what would be your message to the upcoming entrepreneurs?
No, I say this with a great deal of responsibility and sense of sense of some experience in this. I think entrepreneurship is very fulfilling. I think a large number of the future generations that are going to come out of colleges and universities are going to become entrepreneurs. But the definition of entrepreneurs is going to evolve. These concepts of unicorns and billionaires, that is not what entrepreneurship is going to be about. Entrepreneurship is going to be driven more and more about people being able to fulfill their passion, fulfill what they are good at, and demonstrating both the passion and what their capability, inherent strengths in something. So it could be music, it could be entrepreneurship in terms of a store, it could be, so it need not always, entrepreneurship unfortunately in India in the last 5 years has taken on a connotation that unless you do $1 billion deal, you're not an entrepreneur. And that is wrong. You could be running an organic bakery and be a successful entrepreneur. It will still have value. It may not be $1 billion, it could be 20 lakhs, it could be 10 crores, 5 crores, whatever. But I say to entrepreneurs, don't measure this by financial metrics alone. I never did. I never started anything in my life expecting a financial reward. I always was more hung up about the journey. That was I really enjoying it and cracking goals, really doing things that I'd never done before. And the financial stuff will play itself out on its own. So I say this in every university and college that I go to and invited to speak. There is a beautiful, brave world out there that is going to be extremely good for the entrepreneurs of today. Because the ecosystem is much more developed than it was in the past. Financial support, all kinds of other infrastructure support. But don't go in there with only one financial metric in your mind. Then you are setting yourself up for failure. Because that distracts you.
So what would be your message to your super juniors from MIT?
My message is MIT has never been and will never be, in my opinion, a normal institution like all other engineering institutions. It is an institution that has much more built into it than just simply technical education. You must enjoy that, you must absorb that and come out of MIT not just as a technically educated undergraduate or a graduate, but also a much better equipped person to deal with what is going to be a completely new world out there in terms of both opportunities and challenges. And if there is an institution today in this country that can deliver that kind of, let's say, backing for you or that kind of molding for you, MIT is clearly it. I came out of that and I did fine. Many of my friends have come out of MIT and did extremely well. And I don't mean well in terms of financial targets and metrics, but well as individuals, well as human beings, well in their profession. So enjoy the time that you have in MIT, learn everything that MIT has to offer, and you'll do fine, you'll be successful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.